just huge. I mean, it's like a man. It's big.
Kane's son.
You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Perfect organism.
Just tell me one thing, Burke. You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out.
That's the plan. You have my word on it.
All right, I'm in.
Let's rock!
Don't look back, dude! Run as fast as you can!
Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair.
Welcome to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I'm Patrick Green, and I'm joined by
Christian Motzka, and we have a very special guest with us today. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Thibault Claudel, and I'm very happy to be here as the narrative designer and writer for Alien's Dark Descent.
And we're very happy to have you because, as everybody who listens to the show knows, we love Dark Descent. It was recently just back in the news again because there's been some huge updates to it. So a lot of people are playing it again, talking about it again. We thought it would be a great time to have you on the show. I also want to just throw out there that Thibault also was on our friends over at AVP Galaxy's podcast as well.
That's right.
I believe that was back in September of last year, I think.
Yeah, probably, or during the summer, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So you should definitely listen to that as well, because, you know, we're going to cover some stuff that was not covered in that today. So they'll kind of go together nicely. But, you know, we always want to give a shout out to AVP Galaxy as well. But more than anything, Thibault, thank you so much for being here. Can you give us a little bit of a window into, you know, before we kind of get to the game and into Tindalos and everything, just your personal background with Alien, just for people?
Yeah, so I discovered the movies pretty late, I would say, compared to most people, because my parents were very strict about what we could watch and could play, and probably the only parents in the world to, you know, enforce the PEGI 18 sort of stuff. So I discovered them when I was during my studying years, and I was studying in a boarding school, and a friend of mine offered an Alien rewatch. And I was like, yeah, sure, a rewatch. I love those movies. I've seen them a million times, which was absolutely not true, obviously. And so I discovered them through the, I think the DVD edition from, I think the early 2000s or something like that. It was old by already, like, and I discovered the first movie, was completely blown away by it. The interesting thing, I guess, is that everybody knows the creature, not necessarily the movie. And so it was very much my case back then. Discover it, and it freaked the hell out of me. But I was really interested in seeing how the different movies would be different. Like that's a lot of different in one sentence, but how they will change from that original, you know, perspective. And quickly discovered Aliens and fell in love with it. Because I mean, simply because I think it's a great movie. I think it's an awesome sequel. And I was not expecting it to be like that. And also, I guess, again, from that older teenage boy perspective, I discover a lot of things in their original version. I'm thinking, like, for instance, Apon is almost another character in the Halo series for the gamers out there. And you have a lot of things from Aliens that are kind of infused in other games and movies. I think it's a very gamey movie, like the motion tracker or the turrets. They have a lot of gaming qualities to them. And so it was pretty fun to discover, like, the original thing that inspired so many lines and objects. And at that age, because some of you might think that, oh yeah, I discovered it like in my, you know, young, sweet, you know, the children time. But as an adult, I think it allowed me to appreciate those things even more and how different that movie was from the original. And then I guess we went on with the third one and the fourth one. The third one I always loved. I know it's a bit of a maybe controversial take. And I guess you guys, I think one of you defended it, or maybe both of you defended it.
Oh, we defend Alien 3 every chance we get on this podcast.
Okay, that's good. So I'm
some of us more than others. I'll say that some of us more than others.
Okay, it's good to know. Because I remember, I mean, you would probably heard me hear me talk about Warhammer. And I think it's a very Warhammer adjacent movie because it's a very like gothic atmosphere in space, and it has a lot of religious themes. And I think it was great. I mean, the atmosphere and the ambience and everything around that really stuck with me. So of course I was excited to discover what would the first one be about, especially with that end. And discover a very strange movie, like a very, I guess, pulpy take on the Alien universe. But as a fellow French citizen, I gotta respect what Jean-Pierre Jeunet did on that movie. And a fun fact for you guys, the boarding school in which I was actually studying is also a high school, and it was the high school of Jean-Pierre Jeunet. So we actually, came from the same school, sort of. But that's just, so I can shine a bit. But yeah, so fourth one I was kind of felt weird about, but it had a lot of interesting ideas that made me think, I think much more than I thought I would at the time. And great scenes like the xenomorphs swimming is just like my favorite thing. They're just so scary when they do that. And yeah, then do I have to continue with the prequels? I'm not sure. I mean, I love them. They certainly have.
I mean, honestly, I like hearing your take on them. So go for it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's Prometheus is a weird one because I was before I was a writer, I was a journalist, and back then I was still studying in a business school, but I was already blogging a lot, like on my own website and everything. And I remember being super excited with Prometheus coming, And I realized that now I have a huge French accent when I say Prometheus, but sorry for that. But anyway, I was super excited for the movie, the return of Ridley Scott on that franchise and everything. And I remember loving the movie the first time I saw it. And then I guess my brain got infected with the internet discourse of the time, and I couldn't really think clearly about it. And nowadays, I guess I'm in peace with it, especially thanks to you guys and the episode of on Lovecraft and the Lovecraftian, thematic themes and details we can find in those two movies, but Prometheus in particular. And so I guess it has a lot of qualities and stuff that I really like, but I never really forgave the movie for its looks. I don't understand how slick and like modern sci-fi it looks. And I never really I never really found a great explanation for that. And I'm a writer, so perhaps people are expecting me to be more on the dialogue and plot and stories and everything. And of course, I am interested by that. But sometimes how a movie looks really determines for me how much I will love it. And we have a great example with the Alien 3. And so, yeah, I was always a bit bothered by that. I don't know about you guys. And so I guess Covenant has the same sort of problem in my mind, at least, but also great scenes and cool concepts. Nowadays, we entering a new age, I guess, for Alien, and that's what we wanted to talk about together. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for us in terms of exploring perhaps new origin for that creature and new corner of that universe. So that's basically my relationship with it. And as a French guy, I mean, I'm pretty lucky because my parents-in-law, they live near Switzerland, so I was able to visit the Giger's Museum, and I saw an exhibition about his work, like in 2015, in the city where I live in France, so in Nantes. And we also have, I think, the Queen from Aliens and AVP, because I think it's the same in Lyon. So there's a few franchises where I can actually say that I saw, part of that legacy in person, in the flesh. So I guess it's really, as you imagine, near and dear to my heart because of that as well.
So you're blowing my mind right now with comparing Alien 3 to Warhammer, because I grew up, my brother was always painting Warhammer miniatures, and now my kids are into it. And
that's
even
nice.
Just the gigantic circular tunnel, that's such an iconic Warhammer model shape. And
yes.
the Weyland-Yutani guys at the end kind of look like Space Marines with, the big encumberment.
Exactly that, yes.
So that's
that's a good thing I didn't come for nothing. Yeah, still blowing your mind already. I mean, but yeah, no. It's really. I mean, nowadays it has gained a lot of popularity. Sorry, so I have more opportunities to talk about what Warhammer looks like. But back then it was very rare, and so thank God for David Fincher and his movie, because I was kind of using certain scenes and certain characters to describe that universe. And I always felt like they were really close. So yeah, we can do a whole podcast about that, I guess, but for another time, maybe.
Now, you did kind of touch upon part of the reason we wanted to circle back with you is there is this news of the Noah Hawley Alien show deciding to sort of sidestep the prequel knowledge or the prequel lore and the look of the prequels in favor of an ancient, I'm hoping very Lovecraftian origin potentially, but also that used future.
Yes, you talked about that, right?
Oh yes,
yeah.
So I don't know if we want to jump right into this, but we're thinking about, okay, who else has taken the Alien property and said maybe we can go a different direction, because we've just gone through 12 years of comic books, video games, and novels trying to mesh Ridley Scott's new lore with the classic trilogy, or the classic 4 films even. And some brilliant things have come out of that. There have been wonderful comic books, some great novels by Alex White and Philippa and Clara's Inferno's Fall. But now that we've had a bunch of that, it seems like we're getting into a place where maybe people are taking new paths, and your game is one of them. Dark Descent goes, it's been 7 months since the game came out, so I think that we can talk about this. We can talk about the ending finally, but your game goes in a very interesting direction, and we'd love to hear how that came about.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's one big thing that I guess was present within the game, like from the beginning, from what I've gather here and there throughout the production. The one thing you should know about me on that production, by the way, is that I arrived mid-production and after other writers, so I wasn't really aware of everything. But I got to, I guess, bring the game home and, to the finish line. And so I worked on that ending specifically. And when I arrive on the project, maybe we could, talk about that. But they were already planning that sort of ending that will perhaps create an alternate, not necessarily origin, but entertain the idea of the alien, the creature, to be a more ancient thing. And Tindalos are rightfully named after not, I think, a creature from Lovecraft directly, but one of his friends, if I'm not mistaken. And so obviously they wanted to reunite the franchise with that. I mean, regains of some sort of cosmic horror and explore that sort of undertone that we have throughout the movies, but they really wanted to put it forward specifically for the end. I guess first as somewhat of a power fantasy, probably for the devs. Like, we really wanted to see how far we could push that, but also I guess as a reward for the players. So once you've completed that very long and difficult game, you'll have something to, is that the right word, chew upon, like something crunchy, like you can actually have something to remember. And it's not just another mission with the same sort of cinematics and so we really worked, I guess, in the shadows at first. I was always aware of that term, ancient citizen, that was thrown around. And I was like, what is an ancient citizen? And so basically, when I joined, I started to work on the missions, but chronologically. And I knew that the ending missions, perhaps the last 3 missions were not completed when I joined. The rest of the game was already in pretty good shape. But that was always, discussed first and foremost, but also I guess everybody was still working on the level design, the art and the game design, what we could offer in those last missions and how we could make them even more difficult, because we like complex game, I guess, at Tindalos. And also I'm very bad at the game, by the way, just so you guys know. I play in story mode, and so it's obviously the writer will play in story mode, right? That's my only excuse. So it was the background for like during long months. And when it came to writing those, came down to writing those last missions, it became a bit more fleshed out. We were sending concepts and designs to 20th Century Studios, and they were answering, they had discussions, and it was a challenging time. And actually, you mentioned the guys at AVP Galaxy. And I think back then I said that it was a nice process. Everything was, nice and fun under the sun. And our art director, Sergey, told me, "You sweet summer child, you had no idea what we sacrificed for that creature. So Sergey, this is for you." So I discussed with him what actually, happened. I mean, not in every detail, because I was not necessarily directly in contact with the guys at 20th. I was mostly asked for, justification, a flavor text, so we could, grasp a bit better what you guys want to do with those ancient citizen and that Xenotitan of yours. It was mostly that. But yeah, basically it was a long process. But at first I wasn't really aware of how different it would be. And in my mind, it was almost like this thing that we want to do, but perhaps we will not be allowed to do.
It's funny because your experience of working on the game somewhat mirrors my experience of playing the game, which is I had no idea it was going to take the direction that it takes. I think one of the great joys of playing Dark Descent for the first time, and again, if you somehow haven't yet and you're listening to it, just stop, because we're going to spoil
Go
things.
play it.
One of the great, exactly, even story mode, which hey, yeah. I don't judge that. One of the great joys of it is that, it starts off feeling very much procedurally like this is another Aliens game that's fun. It's different because it's real-time strategy and it has some really cool tactical hooks to it. It has the Cerberus protocol. It has some elements of like mystery, but it feels kind of like, something we've done before, seen before. Mm-hmm. And then for me, like it was the cultist thing and the Guardians where I started being like, this game is going in a direction that I didn't quite anticipate. And then what I love is that by the end of the game, it is in a wholly different world. Like you said, with the ancient city and with the Xenotitan mm-hmm. and with these, Marlowe and all the crazy stuff that has to do with him and with his whole movement. And so it's funny that you're talking about working on it as also, it sounds like you didn't really know that it was going to diverge that much and that interestingly. So my question for you about this is, and I know that you didn't have direct contact with 20th Century very much, but let me couch this question with some background stuff. So we have people on this podcast, as you know, all the time who work on these properties, right? People who have written and worked on films, people who have done other projects, whether that be books, comics, video games, etc. And it seems like before Dark Descent, what I took away from those conversations was that 20th Century has some real sacred cows that cannot be tipped over, right? To use some strange metaphors for a moment. It seems like Dark Descent was liberated somewhat from that. It seems like there was, I don't know if it was a laissez-faire thing or something, but there was much more of freedom given to you all to create. So can you give us just some insight into that? Things you might have heard from other people who had more direct contact with 20th Century. Yeah. How were they given that kind of leeway?
So I'll try my best trying to explaining that, because obviously it's an ongoing subject, as you guys mentioned in the intro. But I think the first thing I would say is that to the best of my knowledge, the game was sort of saved from the Fox Disney merger because of the Guardians and the cult. So people had seen the concepts and thought they would look interesting in the game. And because of that, unlike perhaps games that we'll learn about in a few months or years, the game wasn't canceled despite the merger. And it was in very early stages, but was allowed to proceed on the premise that those cultists look interesting. And so I guess because of that, we already had, although I wasn't in the company back then, but I guess they already had like sort of a green light, to, try, explore new things. And they're not really tied to what Sir Ridley Scott had done with the prequels, but still they already, pushed the envelope, I guess, a bit forward. And so we developed an entire game around their cult, and they would be one of the enemies because we didn't want just the creatures. And of course, we wanted for the creatures to have like some sort of skill and, go bigger and bigger with the different levels. And so obviously we wanted to end with a bang. But as you mentioned, like when I arrived, they had stuff that was really well built, and kind of definitive that I didn't want to change nor got the opportunity to change because it was already working. So if it's not, if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of thing. But also the ending and like Marlowe's plan, what was underneath the surface of Leafy, all of that was very conceptual. And I don't know if it was because maybe they had, and that sort of priority management really is common in video games. Like we have that idea for, I'd say like the sort of third act, fourth act of the game and the ending. But right now, the priority is make sure that, I don't know, the gunplay feels nice. The tactical hooks you mentioned work nicely and everything. So it was in the background, perhaps because it was harder to discuss, perhaps because they had other priorities. But it's true that I never felt, at least personally, that somebody was telling me there are those rules and you cannot change them, and we will have no discussion around those rules. The only rule I know about is that and that will actually resonate with you guys, is that the alien is the perfect organism. It cannot be defeated. It cannot be controlled. And so, for instance, the Guardian thing had to be temporary and not permanent control on the alien, because it breaks the only rule that I was given. So this is the only rule I am aware of that I'm aware of. Sorry. for correcting myself on the fly, but at least I'll be correct. That's always nice. But yeah, so other than that, it was mostly what do we want to offer to that franchise and what we wanted to do. And I guess in that regard, everybody at Tindalos, but Romain, our game director, and Tindalos boss in particular, it is, was now that the game is out, but his dream project. Like, he had an earlier version of, like, the earliest I say version of the script is actually like a tabletop sort of war game or RPG that he created when he was 18 or something like that. And it was on a planet, sorry, Romain, to spill your secrets, but I think the planet was something 666, or, like, it was basically hell. And it has already like this sort of effect. I mean, this idea and of going, deeper and darker and throughout the game. And so basically because of that, he and the rest of the team were not okay with, I'd say, an easy pass. And you guys know, I guess, more than anybody, how expanded universes, whether it's for Alien or any other franchise, can feel less like explorations, but just exploitation, And so it's usually, for me personally, because I love those sort of things, and I grew up in the 90s and 2000 where that sort of expanded universes became a thing for a lot of franchises that I love. And I remember some of them being really good. And so I always thought like they had potential. I don't know when or why did we give up on them, but it feels that way sometimes. And to the contrary, I think Tindalos really wanted to, as I said, push the envelope, try new things. And it started with the cult and it ended with the, I guess, ancient citizen. But as I mentioned, and as I discussed it with Sergey and Richard, who were both involved in creating the Xenotitan, it was a long process because we had to justify even the tiniest bits of the creature. So it's like the actual mouth, the snake-like body shape. Why is it that big? Or that's everything had to be discussed because I guess they're really protective of their IP, as they should. And also we wanted to make great things, as we should, as, game developers. I think we have to try to invest in those stories, but also make sure that every player playing the game will get something out of it and not just, already a great combat strategy, tactical system is nice, but Romain was always keen on developing a story that would be original, with that promise, like and perhaps as original as the promise is for an Alien game. So what I was thinking about, so yeah, every little detail, but it's not just the ancient citizens or the Xenotitan. Everything was like that. So I guess I didn't feel that much of a difference. An example I can give you is that in Mission 10, we are introduced to that huge colony, right? And so we wanted to have lights for like the shops and perhaps a diner or a club or that sort of stuff. And they really wanted us to explain how did it become an actual city, why a guy is sending beer or whatever in this corner of the city, and does this street has a name, that sort of. And you may think, that's a bit of a stretch, that's a lot of detail for tiny stuff, but that's how invested and I guess passionate they are also about that franchise. And as a writer and narrative designer, because it's not just about writing scenes or dialogue, it's also about if an artist goes to my desk and say, okay, Thibault, we have a problem because we have signs, but we don't have streets name. Like a proper city would have that sort of things, or markings on the walls or on the road. And what could we do? And so we discussed with Fox about how would that look like in the Alien universe. So is it little details like in the ships, or is it should we borrow from Cobb or from other people that kind of you will hear me probably talk a lot about visual vocabulary, and it's like we have this visual thing. It's also textual, sometimes, but I was really trying to make sure everything feels right and not necessarily correct for the game, but for the franchise as a whole. And certainly, I guess because we've shown that we could be trusted on the numerous and little tiny details. Maybe we were allowed a bit of leeway regarding the end of the game. It was much like the player a reward for us, we'll finally be able to tackle that. But it's true that I have written a lot of story documentation, for instance, about the creatures, the city, and the chronology as well of Marlo's plan, of the ancient history of Leafy, all that sort of stuff. I had to write, although it's not necessarily present in the game. But perhaps the most, I'd say, dedicated players will find little nuggets and Easter eggs here and there in the datapads, for instance, that will probably allow you to, put the story together as video games like to do. But we really wanted to be something special and a massive reward, and not just the sort of reward you see at the end of video games where you can have a beautiful ending cinematic and that sort of stuff. That's whole. I like that sort of stuff, but it felt important to us that you would explore, as I said, exploration, not exploitation, that franchise perhaps in new grounds, in quite literally new grounds on that last mission. And I know that some, maybe perhaps people more interested into the gameplay rather than the story would have loved to send the Marines there. But because of the story, we thought it was more interesting and relevant to bring Mako there. And I know you had Juliana on the podcast. By the way, she says hi. She mentioned that when we talked. So, and yeah, she did a great job, performing, creating, crafting that character throughout the game, because she was also, I was not, writing, in chronological order, not necessarily, but I certainly discovered the game in that way. And so I had discussion that were mostly about first Cerberus Protocol and Leafy, and then every little part of that planet or moon. And in the end, it was that massive thing where, okay, the mission is written, but perhaps we will have trouble, selling sort of that idea of ancient citizens. So they offer, alternatives. There were not really pushbacks per se. But for instance, I remember that we talked about the Empress. Is that correct? Maybe you guys know more about that, like a massive queen that appeared in Dark Horse comics, or that sort of stuff. And it's, again, I'm not saying that to dunk on Fox or whatever, but those companies will always try to use something that has legs, in their mind, because it was created before. It means to them, that it can be used, and it feels right because it's already there. So we don't have to chat about every little detail, like the tail of the creature or the head or whatever. But I guess we like to make things a bit more difficult, and so we really try to push for that ending to be a bit more cosmic horror, and try to make those creatures as dare I say, iconic as possible. I think it's the first original like xenomorph creature since Covenant, if I'm not mistaken. Or so I've been told. I don't know. You guys check up on that. Perhaps comics, created some in between. But at the time when we were working on them, we were told that it was the actual, like, the newest thing, the hottest thing. So I'm glad you guys liked it.
I'm a sucker for all the little details. So you telling me that there's street names and signage for how to get around that city is just wonderful, because all that you guys created this new, ancient citizen, you also created the first large colony, the first cars. These are things that they're implied, of course, as being there outside in the movies, but we don't see that kind of stuff. And so, and I felt that, again, in the same way that this is the most faithful depiction of colonial marines that we've ever been given. Similarly, the expansions into the world felt very, very genuine to me. Like, the research had been done, the look felt right. I feel like Alien Isolation is the most faithful game to the first film, and The Dark Descent is absolutely the most faithful game to the second film, because not only do you have the fidelity of the armor and the weaponry, but because of how you have a limited number of Marines, and as the missions go along, if you're not good at what you're doing, you're losing those Marines. And I tell you, I played with my kids because they're better at video games than me. And there was just by chance, there was one character in particular that they really got attached to. And when he died, and there was the realization, he's gone. We don't get him back unless we restart the whole game. That had the kind of impact that the Hive scene in Aliens had, of, what do you mean Apone is gone and Frost is gone, right? So I feel like your game captured that as well. But now I want to ask you, of course, I want to ask you a little bit. The ancient citizen has the proboscis or whatever, similar to the space jockey, but they seem even larger. Is there supposed to be a connection there? Can you talk to that point?
I don't think there's supposed to be a connection between those two, except for the fact that we really want to explore the same sort of grounds. Like, try to, although I'm super glad that you're mentioning that it's faithful to the second movie, which, by the way, is my favorite for those of you who didn't understand that from the get-go. But yeah, I mean, we really wanted to have, like, the effect that the space jockey has in the first film. That's something we wanted to tap into, So we really tried to think about, size, the atmosphere, the colors, like, what was the room like, not just the creature itself. And so I guess the two creatures are linked by the same sort of effect that we wanted to have on the player. But except for that, I mean, I was never aware of a link between those two. I guess I always treated it as an sort of alternate. Maybe it's too strong of a word, but like another take on the same idea of sort of ancient creature and civilization walking among the stars. And so they're not linked per se, I'd say, but it's absolutely 100% sure that we wanted them to be related in the sense of creating that cosmic horror or dread, existential sort of dread. And so because of this, I guess we went a bit, it's a sequel sort of Aliens. So we have to go even bigger. So we'll make it bigger and it will have this trunk or whatever. But yeah, it was sort of, going again back to my point about pushing the envelope about, around those sort of, vocabulary that we already had. And so the space jockey has this sort of trunk, and there's a lot of details around the chest that were put elsewhere. I don't remember where, but a lot of the things that you see on the Xenotitan, because of validation processes as well, are actually taken from, like they are design cues from other creature throughout the universe. And I guess that's why it works. That's why it feels right and kind of scary. But they're not related, I'd say. And it is it's kind of not uncomfortable, but weird to talk about that for me as a writer, because as a player or moviegoer, I'm always like, I don't need to know everything. I want to have that my little space and discuss with my friends, other people around the world, on the internet, on social media, on podcasts, about what could it be, and I always loved that about the first movie. And so working on that project made me learn to not just entertain that idea in my mind, but also, once you're in the actual shoes of the writer, like what can you do? It's very hard to, especially when you have powerful partners like at 20th, you cannot just say like, oh, it's cool, so it will look like that, and it's kind of the space jockey, but our version, because it's so much better than everything Ridley has done. It wasn't like that, but so we had to walk at tread kind of carefully and try to find a middle ground and try to understand each other. And certainly I remember being asked to write story documentation about the citizens, but I remember writing it and I was like, I need to destroy evidence of that so that nobody would ever know what it actually is. And I think the story documentation, because we're among friends, so I can tell you, is very vague, as vague as I could put it. It was very, and I don't know how we got away with it, basically, because I always felt like now I'm in the shoes of the guy that I hated, or I never really hated Ridley Scott for Prometheus, because, for instance, I think the engineers thing and how it is actually like a suit of armor or sort of a space suit, I always thought it was super clever. And I still think about that, about what nice. It has become sort of a hated thing, subverted expectation sort of discourse on the internet. But I think it was and still is pretty clever. So I'm always, worried about what I would say on a podcast about that. But I remember being in a very difficult position. It's like I would love to say it is just mysterious and cool, and Lovecraft didn't explain everything, and so we want to do stuff just like him for this once, for this only mission, the last one. Please allow us to do that. But at the same time, I had to give a few bits. What was it? And because not everything comes from, although an image will probably speak louder than words, not everything is actually, coming from that. They will have question about what we're trying to achieve. And I guess, that's my little secret, not so secret because I've already mentioned with AVP Galaxy, I think, but that's my little theory is now that Fox has been bought by Disney, they have this franchise, and I don't think the prequels sit too well with that idea of exploring or exploiting, whether it will be one of the other, we'll see. But that franchise, because it kind of puts a stop to everything you could do, and I guess that doesn't work too well when you're trying to create new stories in that universe. And so I can understand why maybe they allow us to do that, because maybe with our small budget, relatively small French team, maybe we were ground, like for experimentation. We were a Wayland Yutani lab of our own, and we could, be little creatures. Like they observed us. Like, would it work? Will it resonate with our audiences? I don't know, because I never had the chance to talk with them, and them being probably in LA and us in Paris, it was very difficult, especially when, COVID years and everything. And so I would love to actually have a chat with them. Like, did we, without knowing, we're actually like the first step of something bigger. And surely when I hear people like you guys, like the guys at AVP Galaxy, being so invested in that franchise saying so, I guess it's probably like there's probably a bit of truth in that. And so I guess I am seduced, convinced by this little theory of my own. But I don't know. We should perhaps, I'll try to reach them at some point and mention once, the movie, Fede Alvarez movie and Noah Haley series will be probably like the biggest, example of that. So I'd say once they're out, perhaps we will see a more open and direct discourse coming from them. But it takes a while. Like if you think about, take another example that I know really well, like Star Wars. It wasn't always so. It takes that sort of things. They take time, and over the years you hear more about it, and it still is fascinating to me how you can quickly go boom or go instant, with one movie or one, even plot detail, story idea. I guess that's what makes my job interesting, but also very dangerous at times.
Wow, there's so much amazing stuff to unpack in that. Kind of working in reverse for a moment, it's interesting you're talking about the relationship with Fox or with 20th Century and how they're it's a little bit mysterious, kind of where they're going, what they're testing. Because pre-merger, we had like an insane amount of access when it was still 20th Century Fox. We had people telling us what was coming out. We had people dropping us, hints of things we could like sprinkle in the news cycle. And really, that is gone now. It has been very much Disney-fied in that sense, and that it's very much a closed shop. But I think you might be completely onto something. And if I could just kind of, for a moment, share an opinion. I'm not sure how much of the show you have listened to, Thibault, but I came into this about 6 years ago because I was a big fan of Alien Covenant, and I was kind of debating Jamie, who was the other main host at the time, about this, and we had like a 3-hour debate about Alien Covenant. Over the years, I think I have realized more why people have issues with it, and I've also realized more why I think I don't. My not having issues with it, I think, hinges very much on Ridley Scott not completing his prequel trilogy, because, as you know, the way it's been left off now is kind of ambiguous, right? It could be that this was just David experimenting and trying to figure things out from an ancient past. So it actually sits really nicely with your game, to me, as like, maybe David was trying to recreate something that predated, the engineer civilization even, or something. So like it actually works. That gets me to this bigger point of, I think that this franchise is really well served by ambivalence and ambiguousness. And what I love is what you're saying, that it's not about providing answers to everything, but it's about filling in enough of the grays that you have directions to take the story in, and you have directions to take the canon in. And it's kind of occurring to me really for the first time as we're sitting here talking about this, that Dark Descent actually is a deliberate course correction in terms of making sure that Ridley's trilogy couldn't be completed, because had his third film linked up with the events of Alien, that would have kind of answered that question. Like, that would have been David as the progenitor of the creature as we know it. But now we have a canon official 20th century product that says that that's not true. So it actually makes me love Covenant even more again, because now Covenant can really just be its own kind of offshoot. And, it creates even more space for these things to make sense. So that brings me to my question, which, can be one of the last ones we ask you today. What was the goal behind Dark Descent? Like from the beginning, what were you and the team at Tindalos setting out to do with this game? Was it to disrupt? Was it to build upon? What were you trying to do with this thing?
I guess that's very cheeky and cheesy, perhaps, answer, but I guess it was a bit of both. Because when I arrived, to be fair, I joined in November 2021. And so like almost 2 years before the game came out, and at the time they had negotiate more months of production, and they were really trying to make that game even better, story-wise, but also gameplay-wise. And they really didn't want to, as it happens on a lot of productions of video games and sometimes movies and other medias, but cut down the story in half and try to find an easier, faster, sort of already seen story. And so I would have said yes to any project in the Alien universe, but I am saying that I also have to remember that when I first joined the project and on my first day, and everybody, maybe before even my first day, I think it was the day that I signed my contract, and it was also my 30th birthday. So it was like a big day for me. And they sort of explained to me the story in a very quick summary, made me play the prologue, which was already almost identical to what we have nowadays. And so it was very, very polished, and I thought, wow, this is great. Like I knew they were working on a tactical. I knew they were working with a big franchise. I didn't know which one until I signed the NDA. But I thought it was a match made in heaven between that franchise, because the colonial marine stuff and the genre, it had been done, I think, once before, but not that much. So it was a kind of a new take on the franchise. And I felt even the actual camera position was interesting. Like, it's a new way to quite literally see that universe. And a lot of, great podcasts like yours and a video game website have analyzed how we managed to create fear and, experience sort of loss, as Christian mentioned, throughout that game and throughout its system. And I think it's to, Tindalos was always really great at systems. I was a fan of the studio before I worked for them. So I guess I can say that in all honesty. And I really thought like you guys actually, outmade yourselves. You created yet another system that's super interesting, obviously inspired by the Alien RPG and other stuff. But it felt really good to tell that sort of story. And it had it's a project with kind of two heads. Like there is a very gameplay centric head of creating a new, use the genre to see the Alien universe from another angle, with a new pair of eyes, I would say. But also what we were actually show in that game would have to be as fresh and exciting as the gameplay. And I always thought it was like that. And what Christian said about Isolation being the game version of the first, of the first movie, I think on my first day, I said to Romain, I said, okay, we will have to make of this game the Aliens version of Isolation. And I think you're onto something. And so I'm down, signing my contract, no pressure, trying to, walk in the path that James Cameron walked for us before us. And it was sometimes really difficult because I put a lot of pressure on my own shoulders, but I was really kind of welcomed, basically very. It could be difficult, especially when you come after other writers, and Matthew Ward, who is my sort of co-writer because he had other obligation, because he's also a novelist like the madman he is not settling with just video games. He's also writing novels, and he kind of handed me the baby and said, you can change everything if you want. So he was a real gentleman about it. He just wanted he said to me, break the curse that there are already so many writers who have worked on this project. Just see the finish line, please. And so he explained to me, like, broke down everything that was near and dear to his heart, the characters, what he wanted to achieve with them, the story, the plot, and everything. And so I found in what he was saying, the second head of that project, the story that was supposed to be large and epic and containing a lot of new factions and creatures and enemies, and also tie in with not only the movies but also the expanded universe at large, and so we had a lot of discussion about that, and I had discussion daily with Romain, our game director. And I remember, having lunch together, breaking down the characters, breaking down the plot. And I presented my new outline in December 2021, while Matthew was working on, I would say, the video game equivalent of a first draft. Like, basically he had done every mission except for the last mission. So he completed his version of the thing while I was starting my version. So it was a sort of interesting time where, like, our visions collide and the different takes. But it was really important to me because I had seen sort of the vision, before my eyes, playing the prologue, like this could be something really exciting gameplay wise, but also if it has a very ambitious story, and perhaps a story as ambitious as the gameplay, that would be something that will resonate with fans. And I am a fan. I want to play that sort of games. And I mean, it's sort of changing nowadays because we're entering perhaps a silver age of IP games because they have bigger production. They were not at some point they were, a bit like synonymous with, fast produced, bad quality sort of game. It's changing. It has changed a lot. And we have new games coming that prove that, perhaps like every month or so. But I know we had like a very humble budget compared to those games, but I knew that because of the ambitious story and the very intricate gameplay, we could do something great with that. And so it was sort of my mission to make sure that it would be infused in every mission, in every cinematic, in every character. And I guess everybody shared that common vision. And to the credit of Romain, because there's a lot of running gags and jokes in the video games industry of game directors playing something and saying, we'll need to add that in the game. They play that on a Saturday, and on next Monday they will tell you to change stuff. He is inspired by a lot of things, but he was always super focused on that vision. And I think because we get along very well, it was actually nice for a change to be sitting next to the game director and, trying to reinforce his vision. Also, I added a lot of things of my own because some details or characters or plot were not resonating as much as the rest with our partner at Focus or at Fox. And so I really wanted to make sure that everything settles, not necessarily would be the favorite character of every Alien fan, but to make sure that they have a little something, which is a very vague thing, to say. But I remember working on Mako quite a lot, working on her journey and trying to make sure that people would understand that she's not supposed to be, because I hate that word, a likable character. She will have like this whole journey. And that was something that a lot of people, including in the studio, were actually struggling with because they find it hard to identify with her. So there were a lot of little challenges like that. But fortunately enough, I had the whole team, passionate about that game, to help me. I had a first draft from Matthew that was already good. And then I got to work on certain scenes that were not in iterations of the game, like for instance, the confrontation between Mako and Price wasn't supposed to go like that in the first few versions of the game, and it's something that I wrote entirely myself. So I'm quite pleased that every once in a while on Twitter or whatever, people will actually post that scene as one of the highlights of the game. And I was like, okay, I actually did the thing, because I remember a Romain saying to me, like, it's supposed to be like this Blade Runner level type of mystery, but in one cutscene. And I was like, oh, how can I do that? It's just too complicated. But I guess it resonated with a lot of people, and the ending as well, although it's very humble in certain aspects because we don't show much, and simply because, to be perfectly honest with you guys, we don't have like a big Hollywood AAA budget, so we had to do with what we knew or was already working. And I think what you guys prove with that podcast, being so interested in the ancient citizens and the city and Marlo's plan. And I'm sorry if I'm not really able to give you more details about that, because frankly, it's not like they don't exist, but I don't think they are as relevant as maybe you could think they are. What we wanted to achieve with this game, and the ending of the game, was also to reunite, the franchise with that sort of cosmic horror essence that perhaps it hadn't lost, over the course of the movies, but it had been portrayed differently. And we wanted to show that we could actually still have, as Patrick mentioned, something that sit next to those movies and still, resonate a bit more with Lovecraftian horror fans and that sort of stuff. And it actually goes back very nicely to my discovery of the alien themes, because I don't know if it was written on the actual French DVD, like Alien Anthology or Quadrilogy, I don't remember, but my friend certainly presented it as an anthology, like something you could actually use the creature and then you tell a story with it. And so when I first experienced it, I thought, oh, this is the first one, and this is the military take on it, and this is the religious take on it, and this is the weird French take on it. And basically, it was always a new, and that's why, for instance, the Blomkamp project was interesting to me, because it was, maybe the movie would have been bad or whatever, but it was opening those doors again. Like, we can actually do Alien 2.5 sort of, and say to the audience that we will have a massive, well-known, world-class entertainment franchise to be an anthology. And I would love that, because I love that format. And I think will work great with that creature and everything that surrounds it. And so I guess all that jazz I'm mumbling about, but it's just really what we wanted to achieve with the games, is not just create a new, fresh perspective through the gameplay, but also tell a story that will use the entire collection of the Alien universe, and in particular everything that was inspired by this Lovecraftian style cosmic horror sort of setting that I think we were frankly missing, So I guess if people are fans of that particular take on aliens or the Alien universe, they would love the game, and others will perhaps, play another game or watch another movie. But as long as this sort of different exploration can continue, I'll be happy with that franchise. And I think as soon as you kind of go in one direction, it's kind of gone. It's exploitation again, where you're trying to revamp the same thing over and over until it has no cultural impact, on people. It's just like, oh, yet another Alien movie, and I don't want that for this franchise. And although it's quote unquote just a game, I really thought that, okay, I'm making an Alien story. It cannot just be another Alien story. That's what I wanted to achieve personally, at least.
Well, I would say that you did. I think this game is it's a big success, and yeah, it reframes Aliens as more of a horror story, or it brings the horror aspect of Alien into Aliens, which is a hard thing to do. Dark Descent is not the first, it's not even the second game to try to tackle a colonial marine based system, but I really feel it's the first one to capture both the feel and also the fear. So I think it's so successful, and I'm so glad that you came on to talk to us about it today.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I'm sorry for the weird French accent and probably a lot of mistakes that I did, but certainly very grateful for you guys to invite me and to playing the game and saying nice things about it.
Yeah.
Oh, we're so grateful for you, my friend. Thank you so much, Thibault, for being here. And if anybody wants to follow you on social media or anything, or see what you're up to, where can they do so?
They can follow me on Twitter, X, that is known nowadays. I'm also on Instagram. I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm trying to find my new home, but if you want, on Instagram, you'll probably see a lot of miniatures. So it will tie in nicely with this conversation. And yeah, hopefully, don't hesitate to send me, stuff that you loved or didn't love. Feedback, as long as it's polite, is welcome. And I actually really like when people reach me and say, oh, this was nice, or this was cool. And it's kind of helps me realize that I indeed worked on that game, because you worked on it for so long, and it's a secret, and then it's announced, and you can talk about it, and then it's out, and it's everybody else game, like everybody and their dog has this game, and they might talk about it and say it's good or it's trash. And so it feels like you're actually sending your children. I don't have any children, by the way, but to school. And then one day someone will actually say something about the game, and you realize, oh yeah, my children are back. I actually work on that game. So yeah, sorry again for finding my words. But definitely hit me up on the social media so we can talk about Alien, Dark Descent, and everything Alien related.
Fantastic. Thank you, Thibault Claudel, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And welcome again to 2024. Lots of cool stuff to keep doing. So let's keep on it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
To find out more information about Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, please go to www.perfectorganism.com. If you would like to support the show, please go to www.perfectorganism.com/support. Thank you.